let's say, welcome in Germany, here in Singapore. So, I am a Kraut. I don't know, somebody know this expression about Germans, so it's an older term. But when we start to talk about this joke, I wouldn't know that my speaker before me would be a Kraut as well. So but not at all. So I feel very qualified to give you some insights about what crowdsourcing or crowd innovation in Germany means. And so I simply like to share one simple idea with you. So what we believe is that sustainable breakthrough innovation leads to social benefits and citizen empowerment. So, but how can crowdsourcing change the game of making sustainable breakthrough innovations? So, first of all, there are three driving forces in the game of making, oops, that's a bit fast, of making breakthrough innovations. So, the industry needs for aiming new markets and leadership and growth, of course. The academia is more on bringing their research results into the reality. And society is on wealth and prospectivity. So this is very necessary to keep in mind. If we can align all these forces, then we will get breakthrough innovations. So I have, it's fast. I have two cases for you. One we did last year with a great farmer concern, it's Bayer. And so we did a question together. We asked the crowd to help to avoid desertification. So this is of course a huge question, and perhaps you are aware that 40% of land on Earth is desert today. And it grows by 50 till 70,000 square kilometers per year. What means, in other terms, at the end of our crowdsourcing week, a quarter of Singapore disappeared. So that really needs breakthrough innovation. And so, of course, we ask for ideas, but a company like Bayer have an own interest, right? And so Bayer was interested to investigate the region for new business, the region of North Africa and the Middle East. And the usual approach would be to make a market research, a big campaign, and then jump into the market. But they changed the game by utilizing crowdsourcing approach and get in touch with local players. And in addition, they explore this new market. And then an elite university from the United Arab Emirates come up with a very good approach, because they have some results about desalination, and in another department they have some results about new ways of generating energy. And our campaign was a stimulus for them to put these ideas together in a completely new concept. And of course, this concept would be a very good antidote to desertification, and in addition, it brings new employment and new growth into a region. And by the way, crowdsourcing can change some simple lives on a way of one person. So this young lady, which came from Malaysia, now is working in Germany, in Leverkusen, and can, for Bayer, now work out her ideas. So how does all that work? So please, I would like you to focus on the small logo on the right side. This is the first ever brand which is registered on a global level by a nation. And this brand is Innovate in Germany, Land of Ideas, and it have now, it is known in Germany by over 50% of the population. And this brand unites industry, academia and society and generates the feeling of trust and faith between them. So this is a very, very important input for doing crowdsourcing activities with a huge social impact. And moreover, it joins forces with strong industrial partners and a very diverse community. And so this let us set a circle in motion, what works like a snowball effect. So this trust to this brand brings strong industry partners into the game, and they not just even only give us challenges, they of course are working together to improve our platform. So this is a kind of open innovation in itself. And in addition, they arose this interest to a huge community, what is of course not just only Germans. We of course have a crowd what is around the globe. And the good ideas we got out will give more strength to the brand at the end. So this is what we have done so far as one example, and now I like to come to a point we just doing today. This is virtual innovation clusters. So first of all, I have to give you a brief overview what clusters are and what we think about clusters in Germany. So the Federal Administration, Federal Ministry of Education and Research in Germany had chosen 15 clusters as leading edge clusters in Germany. So they are located all around our country, and they are dealing with technology fields which are part of our German high-tech strategy. So they are aligned with the interest of all of us, let's say. So as a board member, I have a deep insight into the MyCarbon cluster, and this is located in the southeast of Germany. There we have 70 clustered partners consisting of both industry and educational and research institutes. These partners have together a really strong vision, which is a breakthrough innovation. The common goal is to create an industrial process which enables the serial production of carbon composite parts to be used in the automotive and aerospace industry. That is really a breakthrough because it leads to lightweight construction, and that means a sustainable mobility. And in addition, we plan to cut the costs to more than 2/3 in the same time for this process. So it is, from the scientist's point of view, a very, very hard job to do in the next 5 to 10 years. So InnoFocus has been appointed to develop a cluster strategy for these partners, and in particular we are appointed to make the IT strategy for it. And so we came up with the idea to make it a virtual innovation cluster. So what is a virtual innovation cluster? It's a kind of social network, of course, but it is even more than this. It supports the cluster by carrying out an innovation work much more efficiently, faster, and it is a corporate, and it lets us cooperate with more than thousands experts we do not have involved yet. So only in that region we are dealing with more than 8,000 experts in carbon composites. So this virtual innovation cluster supports shared vision within the community. Let's similar make more business out of the connections in between the partners, provides open innovation processes, and fosters profitability for knowledge sharing and knowledge management. So all this we can achieve by using, of course, social network technologies and adding some more apps which joins the cooperation between the partners. So to come back to what I said before, this gives an example for aligning the interests of industry, academia, and society. For the industry, the benefits are sharing innovation costs, creating new business opportunities, capitalizing knowledge, and sharing up innovation. So for the academia side, the benefits are, of course, capitalizing their knowledge more than normal, and indeed there is more need for research and education. Just in this area, we need 7,000 more carbon composite engineers in the next 10 years. And for the society, of course, there are benefits. It is clear that we have more prosperity in the region because, of course, there will be more than 30,000 new jobs, just 80% in the region. And if we get this breakthrough in that technology, there will be an annual growth rate for 70% just in that technology area. So indeed, crowdsourcing is a vehicle to align these forces to bringing up breakthroughs and making social benefits and citizen empowerment. But just let's have a look from a global perspective. There are not just only even one cluster in Germany what is working on this type of technology. There are more in all over the world, 6 clusters. And so if we imagine that we can combine them by a virtual cluster system, everybody can get an idea what that means in expertise and in innovation progress. So now let me hand over to my colleague.
So I think the picture that you need to have in your mind from what Matthias was mentioning is a reinforcing, self-reinforcing feedback loop in which the development of a cluster and a brand, is that not loud enough? In which the development of a cluster and a brand will basically build the trust that enables online collaboration beyond what we have today in social networks. There's a lot of technical details below that we cannot indulge on today, particularly on how do you make people share information. The most difficult obstacle to overcome is that people would not like to have other people looking into their research results. Yeah? And that's the reason why the model encompasses the capitalization of knowledge, which is also important for universities because they will find it very hard to always supply information without getting any funding for them. Now, we have been speaking about this Kraut innovation. Of course, the Kraut comes from sauerkraut. That is nothing else but what you have in China as pao tsai. The Koreans call it kimchi. I'm sure that the Indians have also something similar, of which I don't know the name, but the process is always the same. And I use that on purpose because I want to talk about the cultural aspect of cluster management and innovation in Asia. In Asia, we have typically a very different education system than in Western Europe, for example. So what we would see in Asia is that you have a lot of data and operations that are being taught, and you have relatively little programs and learning that will give you an opportunity to reflect yourself on what you have learned or what you are doing with the learning. So you will classically end up in a situation where people are very good in executing something that they have learned, and as soon as you pose them a problem that is slightly different, it becomes hazardous, because there is a lack of self-reflection. The second point in Asia that is different is that you have this big divide in between the know-how and the know-who. So particularly the know-who can become very important. And you may have a lot of bright people that are not able to take part because they don't know the people that they would need to talk to in order to come to the party. That's the know-who. And I think that cluster management crowdsourcing platforms is an excellent way of overcoming these thresholds, because they will make communication on a need to communicate rather than whom do I know base a lot more successful. Last but not least, we will come back to the virtual innovation cluster on a global scale. That is something that Matthias has briefly introduced on what that will mean for our future development. But let us take a look at culture first. You are laughing now, but that's good. That's the intended effect. Yeah? My question is, can you spot the similarity? And I give you a moment to think about it, because that is not the color blue. Yeah? But we are actually talking about innovation here. Nature is, of course, the biggest innovator. Yeah? But is there anybody that would like to put up a guess on what is the similarity in between a tree and a shark? Well, definitely that's one similarity.
3.8 billion years of evolution.
Thank you. I think you are spot on of what I want to say. Anybody else? Yeah? So let's go on. What I really think is that both species are very old, indeed, and they clearly both need water, no doubt. Yeah? And we have the lakes, but there are no sharks, but lots of trees. Yeah, that is part of it. And they have a long evolutionary process, and they have come, and that's why I choose these two pictures, to a harmony of form and function. So they have innovated themselves from a very, very simple species, if you want to go back very long, from a single cell into a very complex organism that is in an almost perfect fashion designed for survival in a specific environment. Yeah? And that is why I believe that, for example, a shark can be beautiful. It's not so beautiful if it's swimming at you and you're in the ocean, but if you understand the harmony of form and function, a shark is almost perfect. Yeah? And there's a lot of things that are being learned from a shark's skin. Yeah? Golf balls, for example, will only fly half as far if you take the dimples out. Yeah? Aircraft skin is made now similar because it's better aerodynamics as much as it improves the hydrodynamics for the sharks as well. So what we can see is they are successful in their environment, and it's also a fact that they are a result of mistakes. And I think in Asia we have a problem with making mistakes. And I will come to that in a second, but I believe that that is one of the biggest individual hindrances towards innovation in Asia. We have to be clear that the shark and the oak tree, as beautiful as they look and as long as they are around, are the results of a biological failure. A genetic defect that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. What does that mean for innovation? We have to understand that failure needs to be acceptable, otherwise we won't innovate. Yeah? And in some countries, failure is hard to accept. If you think of the face concept in Asia, or losing face, this is something that makes it extremely difficult for people to fail in something. Obviously, to fail, you also need to accept that you have failed. You can't deny failure all the while, because then you will also learn very hard. Yeah? So you have to accept failure as part of your process. And we need to also be quite clear that what we see are the successes in evolution. What we don't see are all the failures in evolution, but they are all part of the successful end product, be it a tree, be it a fish, or be it any other life form here. And I would like to make reference to Matthias, because in the late 90s he was presented with something that most of you here in the room will not even know anymore. Who is still aware of the Apple Newton?
Who knows this device?
Nobody knows that device. So Matthias, I think it's all your field.
So, of course, I had to test it for my company in that time, and I just meet a couple of minutes to understand that it's good for nothing, really nothing. You can't key in anything, you can't handle it because it was too big. And the only thing I could give as a good feedback to Apple that time was that the basic idea to have a device what takes my notes and my calendar and is able to share this information to my secretary is a good vision.
Yeah. So we can clearly see that even though we identify Apple today with the iPhone and the iPad, we should not forget that the failures of Apple are equally part of the concept, and we can see that Steve Jobs was very, very persistent. He had the bloody idea of an iPhone, I think that was late 90s, yeah? So is it late or middle 90s, Matthias? Middle of the 90s, so let's assume it's roughly 20 years ago. For 20 years he went try, and try again. Yeah? And that is really the concept of Mother Nature as well. So we have to understand that he wasn't discouraged by that failure. Yeah? In Japan, in a big company, such a failure can probably produce a common sense of harakiri. Yeah? But that is not a reason to end your life just because the product wasn't right or the market wasn't ready yet. It's the idea to try again, just as nature is doing it as well. Talking about culture, we have yet another layer, and that is on how people define work. And we would need to be not really internationally very versed to understand who these three regions are that we are talking here about. That is not a hard one to guess. Yeah? We are number one, market share, sales. This is exactly how a company like Microsoft works. And this is the evolutionary model of Bill Gates. Yeah? Grab market share. Even if the product is maybe not yet 100% ready, try it out, get it out, be first, yeah? Be bold. That's also what Steve Jobs says. Yeah? So they are definitely driven by sales. Sales is the trigger. Becoming rich is also a good trigger. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah? So if you talk with a North American manager about what are you doing, if it's a CEO, he will more likely than not end up in grabbing market share, in talking about sales volume, in talking about sales growth. That is a very classical North American attitude. And I think it has something to do with their own history in terms of conquering miles to the west. Yeah? If you talk to a manager in Germany on what are you doing, if you're asking me, for example, what are you doing, you will most likely end up with an explosion drawing of the product. Yeah? That can be very boring, yeah? No doubt. But for me, it's very interesting. Yeah? And if I were to talk about the M73 that you see there in the middle, for me, this is also a harmony of form and function to a very, very high degree. There's beauty in there as much as there's beauty in a shark or as there's beauty in a tree. If you're looking at a Japanese manager, and I've gone through that experience myself, working in Asia for 14 years, they're very process-driven, and they're doing everything in a group. Yeah? So I want to highlight that slide to make you understand that an American concept, a German concept, or a Japanese concept will not necessarily work in other countries. Things will have to undergo a reality check as far as they are really compatible with the culture that is predominant in the area that you want to deploy them. So innovation is happening in all three fields, and probably there are many more ways of looking at work from a cultural perspective. But the question would then be, of course, what happens if we can combine these three or all the other multiple approaches, because they are all relevant. Yeah? Without the American guy that is charging ahead and driving out and selling stuff even if it's just half developed, and many customers will think, what are you selling me here for? Yeah? But it's also important because with that you get momentum, you get passion out there, and you will start to also put, of course, some pressure on your development department, because those guys don't have any more time to fix stuff. They need to do it now. Yeah? If you're looking at the centerpiece, product orientation also doesn't hurt. Yeah, there's also a lot of benefit to be an expert in what you're doing, and even if it's for bloody left-turning screws. Yeah? But even for that you have experts, and people can be proud of what they're contributing. And I took this Kanban picture, but I'm not referring to Kanban, I'm referring to the Japanese consensus model, in which things are being done in a group, responsibility is taken in a group. The loss of face will not be an individual problem, but it will be a group matter. Yeah? So there's also something like an insurance policy in there. And I think they have been very successful as well. We are not shy to see that Porsche, BMW and Mercedes have copied Kanban systems from Toyota, because the method works. So combining these methods, I think, is quite interesting for virtual clusters. Now, coming back to Kraut, there's a lot more to Kraut than what you think. Yeah? You see your kimchi, you see your Paozai, you see in Germany the sauerkraut. There's a lot of things happening here. Yeah? So what we have to be clear is that interconnectivity is very important, and you could achieve that with spaghetti. Yeah? But there's one thing missing that's very important. I'm coming to a close with 2 more slides. Next to the connectivity, you need fermentation. It is pretty useless to connect yourself on Facebook to talk about everyday happenings and exchanging the weather report. Yeah? It doesn't really make sense. If you want to make kimchi or Paozai or sauerkraut, you need to have temperature, you need to have pressure. Yeah? And I think temperature is in Singapore, pressure is in Singapore, no doubt, from the government and the society. I'm not so sure about bacteria, because Singapore is very clean. But of course, I'm referring to bacteria that turn sugars into lactic acids into alcohols. Yeah? But you need, for the innovation concept to work, a certain amount of dirt. Let me put it this way. Yeah? System disturbing matters, unintended outcomes. Sauerkraut, kimchi, and Paozai are all unintended outcomes as much as beer is, but they only had one common goal. They wanted to make sure that you can keep your food and store it and have some vitamins in the winter. So back to innovation, we need more than connectivity, we need fermentation, and the fermentation will go through the sharing of knowledge and pinpointing who has what and getting these people together. Last slide. Specific advantages which are certainly true for Singapore is you can get collaboration in all fields in terms of sales, product and processes, because this is a very, very cluster in itself. 80 kilometers is something like a definition. You can overcome the limitations of the know-who, which I believe is also in Singapore a problem for many youngsters. Yeah, and you will make it easier to overcome the threshold. And ultimately, of course, you will create business opportunities, because you will combine the concept of know-who with the concept of know-how, so we call it know-how plus who. And it will become transparent. Cluster maps will communicate with lower barriers for initial contact, and with that you can fast-track evolution and to innovation by using global diversity, because you need this diversity idea, and this is, I think, Singapore's challenge, because the society is very much streamlined into one mold. So hopefully we would not need to wait for another couple 100,000 years to see innovation happen if we are able to get smart ways of interaction with cognition of the different cultural backgrounds that we all have in order to work together.